Hey everybody, Brian Stevens here, host of SPYPOINT Game Changers, and I'm excited today to have a super cool guest, Brandon Mason from Eastmans Publishing, and we're going to talk about Western hunting. So welcome to the podcast today, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Before we get started and jump into some of our topics, give a little bit about your background, what you do at Eastmans, and some of the things that Eastmans does for the Western hunter and just the hunter in general.
Sure. Yeah, it's Eastman's has been a place that I've been employed at for almost 11 years. I
Wow.
think another month is 11 years already, which is hard to believe.
Yes.
And time flies when you're having fun, of course. But obviously, Eastman's is a 3-generation family-owned business. We've been focusing on Western big game hunting, both from a publication and a cinematography standpoint, for generations and for decades, of course. And I grew up watching Eastman's videos and reading the magazines. And so when I first got a job interview here, I felt like I'd won the lottery. It was pretty cool to see the Eastman family and meet with them in person. And of course, now I work with them day to day. But they've just done such a good job at standing up for fair chase hunting. It's kind of their mantra, and it has been for a long time. In fact, on our TV show, we always end it with saying, fair chase is the only way to hunt and take trophy big game, and we'll see you next time on Eastman's. And that's one of the things that we all believe in big time. And it also lent well to my background. I'm a wildlife biologist by trade.
Okay.
And so pretty passionate about fair chase ethics and wildlife management, hunter recruitment and retention, all that stuff. So I spent I think it was about 8 years with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department, and then about 3 years at the Mule Foundation, plus volunteering for almost another decade, and then came to Eastman's. And so it's kind of interesting how that I couldn't have planned it that way, but that's the way the whole thing fell together. So here I am.
Absolutely. That's a great story. And you obviously bring a lot to the table, not only from a biologist standpoint, but just, general information relative to Western hunting. Obviously you're a passionate Western hunter. So the combination of those two, it seems like a great fit. So let's jump right into it. When you think about, Western hunting, what is the status of Western hunting right now, in your opinion, and then obviously the opinion of, Eastman's as well?
Sure. The status of Western hunting overall is it's good. Things are going really well out west as a blanket statement. There are challenges, of course, with wildlife management in some of the states. Some of our mule deer populations aren't doing what we hope they will be doing. There is some glimmer of hope in that, though. There's some measures instituted by some of the federal government and also with states, with some major funding finally that has come through with migration corridor initiatives, which we've been a part of helping tell that story in our migration film that we launched a few months ago. And that tied in with the Eastman's historical perspective of having so much video footage and perspective and outfitting and all that stuff that has happened in their family over the years, to bring sort of a well-rounded perspective and a background that maybe you wouldn't have if it was just personal based or just agency based or whatever. So the mule deer thing's a major focus right now. Obviously hunter recruitment and retention is a big thing all the time, but as we've all heard, because of 2020, one of the blessings of COVID, if there is such a thing, is that there's been a lot of people that got involved in the outdoors that hadn't in a very long time or maybe ever. And so it reminded people, I think, of what was important in life, and also to just get outside and enjoy, what we have in the United States, which is pretty rare when you compare it to much of the rest of the world. Our natural resources and the freedom we have to enjoy public lands, and also the cooperation with private landowners. And it's the North American model of wildlife conservation is the most successful and unique model ever in the history of mankind. And that's not my opinion. That's a fact by the numbers. And it's kind of a neat time to be alive and be a part of all of it. And like I said, there are challenges. We've got human encroachment on winter ranges, and that's things that are being mitigated. We also are dealing with, as you and I talked about before the podcast, a large predator management strategy. in the United States which largely, in my opinion, is a failed management strategy. I don't think it's being done correctly, but the grizzly and wolf populations are off the charts in many parts of the range, and so that's a challenge. It's being managed now. That again, there's glimmers of hope there, where there are regulated hunting seasons being instituted for some of those species to help get a more well-rounded perspective on managing them instead of just shutting it all down. So
no, absolutely. Great insight. I want to go back to the whole point on mule deer populations being down in some states. What's driving that, Brandon? Is it, over hunting? Is it the predators? Is it nutrition? Disease? What's driving that?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I was with the Mule Deer Foundation and traveling around, speaking at different places and hosting conservation banquets and all that, that was one of the biggest questions that I got is what's the thing that's hurting the mule deer? What's the one thing? And the short answer is if there was one thing, we wouldn't be talking. If there was only one thing, then there would be no problem, because they've learned to adapt and survive and deal with one or two bad winters, or maybe an energy development boom that kind of hit the population a little hard at one point, but they'll recover.
Yeah.
The problem is it's like the perfect storm. And it's definitely not from overhunting. There's been a lot of research and data that has been put out lately where with the way that hunting is regulated modern day, hunters are almost a non-factor from a standpoint of putting a hurt on the population. It has more to do with when you have, let's just say you have 2 or 3 bad winters in a row.
Okay.
And then maybe you also have a drought on the heels of one of those. And at the same time, a new subdivision going in with houses and a new highway cutting across that. And then maybe an oil boom or something, in the area. All of that happening, and predators, of course. Managing predators is a problem that hasn't been done correctly in a lot of Western states, and not because they don't want to necessarily. A lot of times they're hamstrung by the federal government because some of these species are still listed when they shouldn't be as threatened or endangered. And so you throw all that into a mix and you have a recipe for disaster. And but as people are learning to manage a lot of that and work together to form these migration corridors is a big thing. They found out the more multi-year research that's being done, the more they can protect these corridors through generations, because they call it the rose petal effect. So a mule deer doe is migrating through, from the high country to the low country in most Western states. And her knowledge of those migration corridors is so key, because all the fawns that are following her throughout the years of her fawn production, they're learning that. So that's in their, as Mike Eastmans say, their gray matter, it's in their brain, and they don't even think about it. And they go hundreds of miles based on where their mother took them first. And then they almost always migrate up to the same basin or two, in the spring and summer. And so having those corridors protected and open is so key. And fortunately, there's plenty of there's never enough, but there's more funding than there's ever been to work with willing private landowners, with conservation groups, with local communities, whatever, and federal agencies, our federal land management agencies like the BLM, the Forest Service, and also state agencies, to work together to protect these corridors, develop habitat on them, help fund highway crossings so the wildlife can get across that easily. All of that stuff has to work together. And part of the problem is human nature is we all tend to discover a problem and we think we can fix it. This is my project, this is my baby, just leave me alone. Yep. And our group wants the credit, or it's good marketing for this person, and that has to go away.
Yeah,
that mindset has to go away for it to get better. And it's people are coming together for the greater good. And we're seeing it happen. But mule deer, antelope, sage grouse, any of those key Western species that they call keystone species, they're not like managing pheasants in the Midwest where, you plant some corn and a little bit of nesting cover in a tree plot and you got pheasants. It's not
Yeah.
that hard.
Yeah.
And whitetail, generally speaking, are pretty easy to manage for. These Western species are a lot more sensitive, and it takes them longer to recover. And it takes the landscape a long time to recover from disturbance. And so there's good disturbance and there's bad disturbance. So we want to try to mitigate the bad disturbance. And it doesn't mean we stop energy development or anything like that, but just let's work together to see the best way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting gears a little bit, what about the wildfires that, we saw out west, over the past few years? How has that impacted the, Western game and, not just the hunting, but just, the animals themselves?
Sure. Well, on the short term is it definitely disperses the animals to other places because they need, food and cover. Long term, it's generally a benefit to the landscape.
Yep.
Just a few short years, as long as there's moisture that comes with it afterwards. Say this year, for example, if we get some good spring moisture and everything and summer moisture, it'll help those little mini ecosystems recover quicker, because out west, obviously, it's really dry. And so people, it takes the landscape, again, a long time to recover if moisture isn't there. But if the recipe is right with moisture and the recovery plans of the area, which sometimes just means, man takes hands off and just lets,
Yep.
nature do this thing, it'll be tremendous. The habitat will come back with a vengeance. The wildlife will key in on that. And so that'll become the new hotspot. And
Yep.
so even when you're doing your hunt planning, having a wildfire index from across the West from different years can actually help you plan a hunting strategy where there might be an area where you think, man, this just looks like there should be wildlife, but there isn't any, or there aren't any. And then right over the hill in the next canyon, it's loaded. And you think, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why? It looks like the same habitat. Well, maybe there was a wildfire that happened there, just a short few years prior, and it's finally really coming into its own. It's like candy, to the animals. They love it.
No question. No question.
Yeah.
If we go back to the predators, you hit on, wolves, grizzly bears. What is the biggest barrier for changing legislation for reducing these or having controlled hunts that's more frequent and or that allows us to truly get a number on some of these predators that are devastating to deer herds and other game animals?
Well, one of the things that's the most frustrating, I think, is that a lot of the anti-hunting groups are extremely well funded,
Yeah.
and they have, that crowd, the celebrity crowd, and you see billboards and TV commercials of them claiming inhumane treatment of animals and all that stuff. It tugs on people's heartstrings, and those that aren't hunters or aren't educated about the real situation, they get funded partially for calls to donations that way, but also just a lot of famous people, for whatever reason, with the circles they travel in, are not in favor of hunting. They're in favor of the cute pictures they see of wolves and grizzly bears, or they might make a trip through Yellowstone National Park, which is only 70 miles from where I live here, and they see a mama bear and her cubs along the road, and they seem just sweet and like you want to go and pet them or something. Well, obviously they're an apex predator.
They're not seeing them devastate a deer herd or eat fawns and what they do to, mule deer and all that. Yeah.
Right. And especially the wolves are really, really hard on elk. That's one of the things that they're kind of like elk vacuum cleaners, when they come into an area. And one of the things, especially in a tough winter, that wildlife is really in danger of is these wolves are active all winter long. They're active all the time. They're not hibernating like a bear is doing. And if you ever watch a wolf pack separate out an animal from a herd and take it down, it looks like a well choreographed military mission.
Yes.
It's actually, it's impressive.
Yes,
it really
is. No question.
It's very impressive. And they are, I'm not a wolf hater and I'm not a grizzly bear hater. I'm just in favor of sound wildlife management for every species that's out there.
Yeah,
and
having the right balance.
Exactly, having the right balance. And that's one of the things that, no matter, depends on what your belief system is. If you're somebody who believes in the Bible, we're tasked with wildlife management in Genesis, first book of the Bible. If you're somebody who believes in just the superiority of Mother Nature or whatever that means, there's a balanced mindset there too. And just strictly managing for these apex predators in lieu of everything else is wrong.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it definitely changes your perspective when you're hunting in the backcountry, like right here in our own backyard, and you know that you're dealing with those two in particular. Plus, we have a lot of mountain lions and everything else out here, and black bears. Your radar's up most of the time, and you can't spend time out in the field being scared, because then what's the point? You might as well go home. But you just need to be, as they say, be bear aware. Hunt wisely, hang your food properly, don't eat in your tent. All those little tricks that statistically dramatically reduce the chances of you having an encounter.
Yeah.
And I've seen them in the field, but thankfully I haven't had an up close and personal encounter to where I got mauled or almost got mauled. That did almost happen this fall, though, with a giant boar black bear. Actually,
Wow.
one of my coworkers and I took llamas into the backcountry for pack animals, and so we could just hike light, and they're carrying our stuff, which is pretty sweet.
Yep.
And I went to go filter water during midday, and my son, who was running the camera for us, and my coworker Scott Reekers, they were sitting on a ridge watching this buck that Scott was hoping to take, and he eventually did. I said, well, I'm not, it's midday, the buck's probably not coming out, you guys don't need me here, I'm going to go filter water for the next couple of days. And I went down to a creek that was probably 3/4 of a mile away from where they were glassing, I suppose. And this llama that we had rented had a bear encounter 2 weeks prior and had been chased by a black bear. So it was a little skittish to begin with.
Sure.
And I tied it up to a tree close to the creek, and I was filtering water. I was there for a long time because with 3 people and not much water next to camp, I was getting large amounts of water. And I'd probably been there for an hour and a half. And after a while, you're just zoned out, and I'm just kind of, not paying attention. And I hear this god awful shriek from this llama. I didn't know they could make such a noise, actually. And I look up, and to my right was this giant boar black bear down in the creek bottom with me. And he was less than 100 yards from me. And he heard, I don't think he knew I was there. Then he heard the llama, and he went out of the creek and went up in the trees behind it. And I went to settle the llama down so it didn't break the lead rope that it was tied up with. And then went out to chase a llama down. And they don't come like a dog. So that would be a nightmare. And so when I finally got the llama untied, I looked up, and this black bear was circling around and coming in on us. And he was not scared.
No.
Not remotely. He was built like a small grizzly. I mean, he was good sized, and it took quite a bit of hazing for me to get him to turn the other way. And he never ran away. He at one point was 75 yards from me and was standing up on his hind legs and looking at me like, I don't know if I want to come in on that or not yet. He's just checking me out. And I didn't have my pistol with me. I had bear spray, and my rifle was back on the ridge where my son and Scott were sitting. And fortunately we had walkie talkies, and I yelled at Scott to get over there with his pistol immediately. And we never had another problem with a bear, but one little incident like that will again make you bear aware. So I got a little lazy. I wasn't really prepared, and thankfully it didn't end in a disaster, but it definitely got our attention.
Yeah, no question. And that it's a matter of just being heads up, being prepared, and when it happens too, not panicking, and knowing what and how to manage the situation, which is easier said than done. I've done a lot of bear hunting in Canada, and done it on the ground and had bears 10 steps eye to eye, and it's definitely nervy. And when you get one that's big like that, I mean, he had a plan, and his plan was to come in and eat something and get some food. So I appreciate you sharing that story. So, but do you think anytime in the near future there will be some legislative changes? There will be something that will shift the balance a little bit to help get a little bit more control over these wolves and grizzlies, again, just to create some additional balance?
I think, the legislation itself, I don't know if there'll be much of that because again, these um, I'll call them anti-conservation groups is what they
Yeah.
are, because true conservation involves hunters and involves the whole picture. But these anti-conservation groups, they once they sense anything is up for a vote or in legislation, they're all over it and they'll get it squashed most of the time. So hunters need to be very vocal, need to be very eager to donate to the groups that are fighting causes like this. There's a bunch of really good ones out there, but some of the groups that do more than you think they do just by their name is Safari Club International, SCI. They really stick up for hunters' rights. They do a good job with that. Dallas Safari Club's another one. All of them do. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, Sheep Foundation, all of them do a good job. But so get really involved and vocal. And one of the things that sportsmen don't realize is being a member of those organizations, whichever one you want to be a member of or ones, it's not just about going to a banquet and winning a gun. It's about being a member, because when they have membership, it shows support, and then they can show the lawmakers, and they can show the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they can show the Department of the Interior, whoever. They can show those people, hey, we're representing a large number of constituents that want this to change. It has to stop, because some people say, well, just let the biological data manage it, and that would be, I agree, that's the way it should be. But the biological data right now is on the favor of not having them listed. And so they shouldn't be listed. They shouldn't keep moving the goalposts. They shouldn't keep changing the rules. The Endangered Species Act needs to be reworked, in my opinion, because it's become overreaching, and like much of the federal government has become, and that needs to change. And until that changes, it's going to be, a struggle, a fight uphill for hunters and for even the state wildlife agencies to continue that fight to get them delisted. So wolves, for the most part, well, it depends on where you're at, but for the most part, where we're at, the Intermountain West, are delisted with very tightly managed hunting seasons. And so that's a step in the right direction. Grizzlies were delisted a couple years ago, and we were supposed to have a limited hunting season started. It was supposed to start that September, and the animal rights groups got an injunction placed right when the season was supposed to start for 2 weeks, which bought them more time so that they could get them relisted again. And so grizzly bears went back on the endangered species list, which is complete garbage. Like I said, I'm not anti-grizzly bear.
Not at all.
I'm anti-idiots is what I'm anti. And there's just no excuse for what's being done. There's no place in wildlife management. One of the episodes I was on in our own TV show, I was ranting and raving about the grizzly bear situation. That was the year that they were supposed to be delisted and were relisted. And actually, it was the same year we had a record number of encounters with people, not just hunters, but even before that in the summertime, with people recreating in the national forest and around Yellowstone. And I said something about a liberal judge relisted him or something in the show, and I was ranting and raving. And one of the comments on our blog said, or on YouTube said, leave politics out of, you said something about a liberal judge. And my response was, I agree, politics should be left out of it. That was my point.
Correct.
Is that I wouldn't be talking about a liberal judge in that episode if they didn't have anything to do with wildlife management. If the state agency personnel, professionals that are hired to do this stuff and trained very well were allowed to do their job, we wouldn't have this problem.
Great point. Great point. Some people don't want the reality and the truth of the situation, and that's the unfortunate part about this.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We covered the predator piece of it. The status of hunting out west and things for the most part are going very well. Somebody wanting to get started, jump into this, and we can maybe break it into elk hunting versus mule deer hunting. But, let's just start with elk. What would you suggest? How would you, suggest somebody to get started in this undertaking? And, once they hear and see all about it, it just, what do I do to get going and, get started?
Sure. Yeah. And if somebody's just getting started in it, it can be very intimidating, because there's, especially hunting out west, it's kind of a riddle to figure out how to apply for the licenses. Some states have preference points, some states have bonus points, some states have weighted bonus points, some states have no bonus points. And then, like you said, you have the various species, and in trying to build a plan for that can be daunting. And so that's that. This isn't just a shameless sales pitch for what we do here at Eastmans, but one of the reasons why the Eastmans do what they do, why we have a company, is because people were starving for this information even back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And like, man, I want to come out west, but I don't know how to do it. Even if they were already lifelong hunters, but even that out west topic gets even more intimidating. I mean, not only is the country bigger and the predators are bigger, but so are the draw odds statistics are bigger. It's harder to get your mind around all that. So Eastmans has been promoting for a long time. Mike Eastman started doing this years ago. He's got some best-selling books on hunting, and he's always talked about building a multi-year, multi-state plan. And the reason for that is there are some coveted tags for what are considered limited quota or trophy units, where people want to match wits with a mature animal, and these animals they're really hard to get tags for because there's just not that many licenses or tags to get them. There's a lot of people that want them, and so that you set your sights on building points and playing the game for a few years. So that's something that's out there a ways. And then you have, say that's a preference point state like Colorado. So Colorado, you're not going to draw the license unless you have the amount of points that it takes, period. There's no random chance of drawing those licenses, as a general rule. Then there are states like Nevada that has a weighted bonus point system. And so once you get X amount of points, it starts squaring itself, but there's still a random portion of that draw. So that's your next tier down. So you have the preference point system. It's really like your dream hunt someday. It's going to take you 10 to 15 years or more of applying. I know guys in Colorado have 24 preference points that are waiting to draw one of the hardest deer tags in the state. I mean, so 24 years of dedication that's taken. But that's like that's the dream hunt, right? That's out there. And then you have that middle tier of, Nevada, Wyoming, other states that have sort of either a preference point or a weighted bonus point system with a random draw percentage of licenses, so that there's always a chance you could draw. And not every unit has it in a state like that, but some states do have. Some states do offer every unit that has a random percentage. Some states just have a few units that offer that hunt areas that offer that. And then you got other states like Idaho is a great example where there's no preference points, there's no bonus points. It's 100% random / over the counter. And so there are definitely states that either the draw odds are really good to draw, so the percentage of you drawing is high, or they're over the counter licenses. And those are the ones that you cut your teeth on. And so you try to get a cow elk license, for example, or maybe an antelope doe tag, and you're learning the areas, you're learning how the species acts, you're consuming content from hunting periodicals and magazines and videos and YouTube and podcasts and whatever, just to pick up all these little nuggets of how to become a better hunter, a better shooter, watching gear reviews, all that stuff, so that when the time comes, you're ready to go. And just know that even those of us that have been hunting all of our lives, every year is a learning experience.
Sure.
And so you don't ever just get to a point where you go, boy, I pretty much got it, and I don't have to learn anything else. Every year the animals teach you something, the terrain, the weather, the choice of weapon that you're using, whatever. I mean, I had a painful learning experience last fall on that high country mule deer hunt I was talking about. That's an over-the-counter tag for residents in Wyoming. It's a draw tag for non-residents, and great deer area. And Scott and I were up there, and we had scouted it hard. So we'd go on up. That's another tool, of course, for people that getting to know an area. If you can spend time, just go on a summer hiking, fishing, camping trip with your family. Just get the lay of the land, and you'll start seeing critters. You'll notice where they are, where they aren't. And anyway, we did that in this area. We try to scout it every year when we're going in there, and we had, man, like half a dozen shooter bucks like in this one area, and we were so pumped, and we're like, here we go. One was a giant non-typical. I mean, everything that that hunting videos are made of. And we were stoked. So we went in there, and the first hour and opening day, we found one of the big slick typicals that I had seen when we were scouting, when I was on it would have been the east end of this ridge, and Scott was on the west end, and we were scouting. And I told him, I said, man, I saw a tanker of a typical. He was just huge, a beautiful deer. But he'd always just give you these slight looks. It's not like we got to study him in the spotting scope for a long time, but it was just these little teaser looks that we'd get. And enough to know he was big.
Absolutely.
And the first hour of the first day, we were still hunting into it was a tough country to hunt. And so we had to take a gamble and still hunt at first light to get into where they were. And it was a slight chance of us spooking them. Ideally, you'd watch them bed and go put a stalk on them, but that just wasn't in the cards in this area. And first hour, I mean, it wasn't even the first hour, first half hour, barely light. And we look up, we saw the white rump patch of a mule deer up this steep basin that was like this. And there he was, that slick typical, beautiful, beautiful deer. And Scott knew that I wanted to harvest him if I could. And so my son got the video camera ready, and I got my shooting sticks out. I jacked one in the chamber, and the buck does one of these numbers, and he's looking down at us, and he was quartering away pretty hard and turning back towards us. But I had a shot at his vitals, but it was just small. And my rifle was dialed. I was confident. And my problem was I was probably too confident, because what I did is I should have aimed, because it's hard to explain, but if you ever see the footage, I should have put it at the base of his neck, because it was crumpled around sort of in front of his vitals. And instead I tried to just bust his shoulder, and I shot just a little bit to the left, which ended up in a rump shot right in his rear end. And I was sick. And we looked for 2 days for him, because I had done that years ago in a Badlands type hunt, and I found the buck. And so I was like, okay, it's not an ideal hit. We're going to find him. We're just going to give him lots of time. We're going to find him. And we looked for 2 days and never found that deer. And that's the only buck in my life I've ever lost with a rifle. And even to this day, I'm not being overly dramatic. To this day, there are some nights I wake up in the middle of the night and it's haunting me. It's just going over and over in my head, So here I am. I'm 44 years old. I've been hunting with a rifle since I was 14, and I screwed up. It was a painful learning experience.
Listen, it is. So my first mule deer hunt, 2015, won't forget it, New Mexico. And this buck is called El Guapo, 220-inch double drop tine velvet buck. We get on this deer, and I'm bow hunting, and my cameraman, bails. And so my buddy who's guiding, helping us run camera and trying to guide and do all this. And we got on this deer at 60 yards straight down a mountain. And so I learned a very valuable lesson too. I bow hunted for, all my life, but, and he shook me up a little bit. There's no question, and he's looking back at me, and he's just there with, and it's that time of year, there's 5 or 6 other bucks. And Brandon, when you're shooting high or low, even with a rifle or a bow, you have to compensate if those extreme angles. And he was at 60, and he had me pegged, and I had compensated, I think, enough for the drop. Maybe I could have done more, but because he was so steep down, I didn't aim low enough even for that. And that arrow sailed right over his back, and I watched that buck just jump away out of my life. And so I can appreciate that vomit sick feeling of watching a deer like that, and making a mistake. So.
Yeah. The silver lining to events like that is, number one, you learn something like we said. And then the thing that I hadn't thought of until I was telling my wife about what all happened on the hunt, and how I was I was really beside myself.
I'm sure you were.
It takes a lot to get me speechless, and I was speechless for days.
Totally, my friend.
But my 15-year-old son was running the video camera, which he's become pretty good at, and he just wanted to be with on the hunt. And he's been in the high country a lot with me, but this was definitely most physically demanding trip he'd ever done. And for him to see the emotional roller coaster of not just the physical grueling bear encounter, getting water, starving, all this stuff, but he knows my favorite thing in the world to do is hunt mule deer. I've been doing it, before I could hunt. I was with my dad, and that's what we've done my whole life, and that's kind of our thing. And I love hunting everything, but mule deer is my thing. I just love it. And here it was, this beautiful high country mule deer, what dreams are made of, what you picture for years in your head. And it was an easy shot. It was 130 yards. He wasn't like it was a really long shot or anything. And I was confident and everything. And he got to see me at some pretty lows that he usually probably doesn't get to see me in.
Sure.
And like my wife said, what a lesson for him, hindsight now, what a lesson for him to see how a man is supposed to behave through adversity. And that was sort of an accidental training up of a child, if that makes sense. So that's one of the things that I love about hunting, whether it's in the high country or not, is, and this is for any new hunters that are listening to this, is there are life lessons learned in the field that are really hard to duplicate anywhere else. And not saying it's impossible, but it's hard. And Teddy Roosevelt has a lot of famous quotes, but my favorite quote of his, it's actually in my email signature, which you've probably seen, is, "Only he who has partaken thereof can appreciate the keen delight of hunting in lonely lands." And that keen delight really it's the adversity, it's the successes, it's the failures, it's the camaraderie, it's the solitude, it's all of that. It's the way the country smells and looks, and the animals that live there, and it makes it a special place, and that's not, like I said, it's not just the high country, that's anywhere. And there's ups and downs all the time in the outdoors, and there's merit to learning. This doesn't get represented very well a lot of times on all of our hunting shows that we do and everything, but you're taking a life, and that's a serious deal. It shouldn't be wasted. You should be not just thankful for it, but you're going to put as many parts of that animal to good use as you can. And it's the best, in my opinion, the best table fare anybody could ask for. So it's a complete package.
No, it is. There's no question. Just real quick, I'll share a story, based on what you just said. So my son was graduating from high school, and his senior present was, I wanted to take him on a trip somewhere. And he's a hunter in the Southeast. He's, harvested a lot of whitetails, good hunter, become a good bow hunter. And so I had a chance either take him on, whitetail hunt in Canada, which, would have been honestly a layup hunt, or
Sure.
take him to Idaho on a, pitch tent, backcountry, horseback, bust your ass kind of hunt, and just see what it's all about. And so I took him to Idaho, and it was a butt kicker. We walked 8 to 10 miles a day, and it was early. There was nothing bugling, and you got the horse on the mountain and everything, but I wanted him to experience it. By day 3, he's ready to tap out, not seeing anything, not hearing anything. Most grown men would have checked out just the physical demands of all day. And so he got a little, frustrated with me. And I said, look, what I want you to do is to not think about that we're not hearing or killing anything right now. This is about experiencing something so beautiful. And most 17-year-olds or grown men or women don't get a chance to experience. And so, you have to understand that people would be, giving up at this point. And so the last day we finally got on some bulls, and he didn't shoot anything, which is fine, but he finally got to hear that bugle. He finally got to hear it in his chest, and, just the climbing up and down. And that's, what I wanted him to take away. And I think he'll appreciate the experience more in life and reflect upon it. But, I was just like, look, we were just small group of us all working together to put this, together for him. And, and that was something that was important to me, was the experience and the gut check that, he had to experience and make a decision, either give up or keep going, no matter if I shoot something or not.
Yep, exactly. And that's one thing I told my son too, is that, when we got back to the trailhead, days later, and Scott had harvested one of the bucks that we were after. And, we're finally back to the truck and we're tired and we got to deal with the llamas and gear and all that stuff. And I told him, I said, now, do you see why I always tell you and your sisters why I don't tolerate too much drama? And it's because it's about perspective in life. And I said that this is one of the reasons why I do these trips every year, is because it reminds you of what's actually hard and what's not. And so when we all get on our little soap operas and rants in our day-to-day lives, and then you think back on when you had a bear coming in on you with a llama that was about ready to freak out and everything else, and not knowing if he was going to charge or not, and you go, yeah, this isn't that big a deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great perspective.
Yep.
So let's get to the home stretch here and talk about some of the states that you think are maybe some hidden gems that are on and off the radar right now. And I know you guys have a tag system that you could maybe talk about, Tag Hub, to help people, whether it's those hard to get tags or just some of those let's just get started, get my feet wet type of hunts.
Yep. So what you mentioned was our thing that we call Tag Hub. We for 20 some years in print, in our Eastman's Hunting Journal and Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, we have our members research section. That's one of the things we've kind of become known for, and we pride ourselves on. It takes a lot of manpower, like over 2,000 hours of man research a year to put that together. And we finally found a way to put it in a digital format so that it's searchable, available, 24/7 at your fingertips. And we can put way more information into it than what's limited by print. And so it's kind of a membership driven thing, but we have over 500,000 data points for all 11 Western states to help people, whether it's existing hardcore backcountry hunters all the way up to the people who just started hunting in 2020, so that they can help make sense of all the Western states. If you go onto their websites, it takes a while to learn their lingo. It takes a while to understand what they're calling preference points as a bonus point in another state, and what's a hunting unit is a combined draw area in another state. I mean, all that there's a big learning curve there. And so what we try to do is streamline it as much as possible across the states. And then what you can do is, say you have 0 preference points, or you want to find those states that are over the counter, what we all call OTC. So you're in Tag Hub and you see OTC, that means over the counter, if for those that don't know. And boom, OTC, hey, that means I can purchase it over the counter. Colorado for elk hunting is tough to beat. When it comes to opportunity, you can buy over the counter elk tags in a lot of areas in Western Colorado and just go hunt. And so it's a great way to cut your teeth on it. Well, all the while where you're consuming information on how to call elk, what gear to use, how to become a proficient shooter, what are the animal's habits during different times of their life cycle through the year. That's all part of it. And then using that also to, like I said, you can search by the amount of preference points needed for certain units, and a good way to start is just simply look at the ones that take a lot of points. That's not an end all be all to for sure being a good unit. Sometimes it can be a lot of hype in some units, but that could be your starting point. Like, okay, there's something going on with this area in this state I probably want to pay a little closer attention to. One of those areas that's not a grizzly bear infested area in Wyoming is Unit 7 for elk. And I'm not just trying to single out a unit, but and ruin it with too many people applying. But just as an example, people could look at that, okay, that's one that takes quite a bit of points for a non-resident to draw. But I should, when I draw it, have a good quality hunt. Montana is another one that it's not over the counter, but the draw odds for most of the state are really good. You can get like a general tag, essentially, which just means you don't have to stick to a specific unit, but you have to stay out of other limited quota units that are more coveted in the state. I'm a big fan of telling people to hunt central and eastern Wyoming in some of our walk-in areas, which are our private lands open for public access. for antelope. And it can even be for a buck right away. The draw odds are almost 100%, even if you have no points. And it's a great opportunity to just learn how to hunt out west. Or maybe antelope's on your bucket list, but you're 55 years old and you know you'll never draw a unit that takes 15 points because you won't maybe feel up to hunting at that point in your life or something. Then come to Wyoming and hunt antelope in an area that is a little easier to draw. You may not have opportunities at the biggest bucks in the world, but it's about the experience, and getting that meat to take back home and enjoy in the camping trip or the camaraderie that with family or friends. That's a big one. Idaho, like I said, is a lot of over-the-counter or general draw odd type licenses. Nevada has the opportunities with they're limited quota units, but they have the weighted bonus point system with a random draw element to it, and so there's always a chance to draw, which is nice. Other states that are really hard to draw on a lot of their units are places like Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon. A lot of places like that can be super tough to draw, just because per square mile there may not be a lot of animals, and there's a lot of people that are trying to get those licenses. So having a kind of a 3-state plan, a 3-state 5 to 10 year plan is a goal of what somebody should have. So
good way to put it.
Pick a species in a state where you can hunt it theoretically every year, and then pick that one that you can hunt in the next 3 to 5 years, and then pick one that you can hunt in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, depending on what you want to do. And also, of course, there's opportunities to go, once COVID restrictions are gone and all that, to go to Northwest Territories, Alberta, British Columbia, Alaska, and to where getting the license is not the hard part. It's the travel to get there. It's the logistics that cost a lot of money to do. But yeah, there's so many opportunities, and to promote a little bit what we do here, especially the people that maybe are new to the game, call our office and ask us. If you're looking at our journals or our Tag Hub online service or whatever, just ask questions, pick our brains. We do this every day. This is what we do. And we've got people that specialize in certain states. Like, I don't write it anymore, but I used to write the Colorado section and do all the research. It would take me 160 hours over the course of about 2.5 weeks. So I pretty much didn't sleep to get Colorado's members research section put together. So it's like writing a term paper. Absolutely. And we're all doing that for all 11 states. Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's funny you said that. I was going to just ask if, somebody could just call and pick somebody's brain there, and you just offered that up. And that I think is huge. So it sounds like you have, all of this. Is it on eastmanshunting.com? Is it a YouTube page? I mean, can you just break down, where do you find Tag Hub? Where do you find just the general tips, calling gear, and that type of information?
Sure. So Tag Hub, you can find at taghub.eastmans.com. It's TAGHUB.
Got it.
.eastmans.com. And there's 3 different membership levels to choose from. And, the higher you go, the more benefits you get, of course. And we do monthly Tag Hub gear giveaways. We're also doing some premium hunt giveaways. One is a $16,000 elk hunt that we're giving away this year, 2 antelope hunts and a deer hunt.
Nice.
So some premium stuff. Plus, in fact, I think March we're launching the March giveaway is a $2,100 Everly stock package for Everly stock backpacks and gear. So, and we've got, I think, a $2,500 Sig Sauer optics package coming. We're giving away a Matthews bow in a couple months. A set of 3 sets of Zamberlin boots for early, mid, late season for one person to win that. So they'll have boots for everything they need. Wow. The list goes on and on. I mean, we got so much stuff that we're doing. And so that's an added benefit of being a member. We also put out our TV show content that usually only airs on the Outdoor Channel, and our Beyond the Grid online video series. Those are put in Tag Hub behind the paywall for just Tag Hub users only, before anybody else gets to see them. Nice. We put up tons of blog articles and gear tips, and we have a lot going on at Eastman. So we have the Tag Hub is our newest big thing we're promoting, but the 2 magazines, the TV show, which is one of the longest running TV shows on the Outdoor Channel, called Eastmans Hunting TV. We've got the Beyond the Grid webisode series, which is on Amazon Prime. It's on YouTube. It's on our blog. It's on Waypoint TV. We try to put it everywhere we can.
Wow, you guys
and then we've got a thing that we started now. Speaking of podcasts, like we're doing, we've got what we're calling Podcast Central, because now we're the home of 3 podcasts and potentially more coming, that we launch an e-blast once a week with all of the newest podcasts from our various podcasts we do. One's a Western big game focused podcast called Eastman's Elevated. One is our Wingman podcast. We started an upland waterfowl and turkey brand a few years ago, about three and a half years ago. And then also a one called Flycast, which is all about fly fishing. So lots of learning to for new hunters or existing hunters to just go over what we got out there. There's an endless stream of content that's coming constant. We put out tons of social media posts and e-newsletters, and it's I always laugh that when I started here at Eastman's, we had 2 magazines, a TV show, and a deer tour, and that felt like a lot.
Sure.
At the time. Now we have those plus 2 or 3 online two online webisode series, with Wingman and Beyond the Grid, and we have the podcasts that are going on, and we got tons of crazy new partnerships going on with companies like Black Rifle Coffee Company and Fieldcraft and things that companies that, great coffee, things that places we never used to work with, that are doing a lot of cool things. And they're also doing a lot to try to protect our Second Amendment rights. And we're sort of jumping into some exciting opportunities with them, and just lots going on, man. It's cool.
No, that's a beautiful thing. And, what I have learned over the years, and I have had the opportunity to hunt with some guides, do some things on my own. Western hunting is one where you need lots of information. And having the expectation that you may go 2-3 years without having success, but going into it, defining what success is. It's not just about, just shooting an animal. But its knowledge is critical to that versus, and again, I'm not minimizing the Southeast and the whitetail hunting, but you can sit in a tree stand over a food plot and you can hunt and have fun and harvest something. Going out there is an experience, and there's so much to it. And what I appreciate that you guys do is provide that information and content, which ultimately is going to help with hunter recruitment. So the more confident you are in the information you can absorb and feel like there are people like yourselves and organizations that want to help, that want you to come out and be part of this beautiful experience, then they're just going to do it more often. They're going to tell their friends. And so it's just a philosophy that I appreciate that you guys do. And I, followed Eastman's years as a kid, but what you have developed today is pretty impressive. So I appreciate you sharing all of this today.
Well, I'm really glad that, we could hook up and do this podcast, and we love working with you guys on a lot of things too. And one quick note too that I wanted to mention to the new hunters that are out there, we know that sometimes people will look at some of the content we produce and the information that's out there, and it gets pretty intimidating, because you see a lot of, for lack of better terms, trophy quality animals, and meaning they're a unique representation of the species where that's not something that you see every day. And so some people think that they either can't measure up to that, or they might think, we've heard people say, well, I'm not a trophy hunter and I don't like that, because they think that we're using different definitions of what trophy hunting is. To them, trophy hunting is a guy that poaches something, cuts the head off, throws the head in the back of the pickup and leaves the body there to rot. That's poaching. That's not trophy hunting. Yeah. And so there's different stages of the hunter that, and this has been written about for decades, but, we all start off at, various ages getting into hunting. And at first you're just hoping to draw a license or to have that opportunity in the field. And then you just want to fill the freezer. And it's like, well, I don't really want to just fill the freezer anymore. I want to fill the freezer and maybe just get a little set of antlers. It'd be kind of cool, like a little set of a spike whitetail or something. That'd be cool. And then and then that leads, over a few years to the next stage of just shooting. I don't need a giant, this trophy thing, but I just want, a good representation of a kind of a mature animal, but not, a big one. And then pretty soon you get to that stage where you're like, you know what, I thoroughly enjoy matching wits with a fully mature animal in the field, because you're in their backyard, you're in their living room actually. And the chances of you being successful usually are not very high. And you're matching wits with that animal, and dealing with weather, and they're used to living there. They most of the time they know you're there because something doesn't feel right, it doesn't smell right. And in the term trophy hunting, and this is something Ike Eastman has been talking about a lot lately, is that's not a term that should divide hunters. In fact, if anything, that should be something that we strive for and unite to, because like the Boone and Crockett Club, that's a group I forgot to mention earlier, that has been fighting for hunters' rights and fighting for conservation for over 100 years. Actually about 120 years. When Teddy Roosevelt and others started that, it was because the market hunting at the time had just really decimated wildlife populations. And so at the time, you were the big bad guy, big bad hunter, if you had a meat pole full of 50 whitetail or something, or how many buffalo or bison did you shoot? It was about quantity. And so they knew that there had to be a practice of restraint by hunters in order to prolong these wildlife resources. And so they developed the Boone and Crockett trophy scoring system, so that people had something to aspire to exercise restraint, to allow animals to reach maturity. And that's what trophy hunting is. It's actually the true nature of being a conservationist, is that you're letting animals get to maturity, and then you're matching wits with them and still enjoying their table fare. And it's a package deal.
No, and you know what? I love what you're saying, because I've grown up that same way, just in the South from a whitetail standpoint. And it's less about how many inches, in my opinion, but more about the maturity and the age of the animal, because you can have in an area 140-inch whitetail that's 6 years old, 6.5 years old, that is hard to hunt. You might have another place, that same deer in Iowa is going to be 180, 200 inches. It doesn't take anything away. Yeah, they're two different animals from an appearance standpoint, but mindset and how to hunt that animal, you should be as proud of that 140-inch, 6.5-year-old that you shot in Georgia, Alabama, that you shot a 200-inch in Iowa. And so I think it takes years and time and patience and learning to do that consistently. We've all, come across animals that when we least expected, but to do that consistently, I think, just takes time and patience and investing into that hunting practice. So I appreciate you that. I have one last question for you that just, when we think about some of the regulations, I know that's come up about the use of trail cameras in some states, and the ability to use them or not. What are you hearing, and what is your thought, and how are you guys, addressing this potential, change and or, minimizing the use of them?
Sure. Well, there's a couple states right now that have bills introduced, as I think you guys are aware, where, like everything, people take things to extremes. So you have some bills that outlaw all trail cameras because they've been abused. And then there's others that are saying, no, there's just going to be a trail cam season. So you have to have them down by a certain date, and you can't put them up until a certain date. Kind of like out west here, we have shed antler hunting seasons because, again, people abuse the privilege. So if everybody was honest, this would be a moot point. This wouldn't even be a thing. But you have, the bad apples of the group that abuse the privilege, and some guys are using their trail cam locations, kind of like tree stand locations in other parts of the country, where they sort of claim public land for their own, as if, they get territorial, I guess you could say. And obviously that's not the intent of any, whether it's SPYPOINT or anybody else, for hunters to do that, or for outdoorsmen to do that. So, there's legislation introduced in different states that are taking it to all extremes. The way we feel here at Eastmans, and this isn't like we have some official position on it or nothing, but we use trail cameras in some states, in some circumstances, It's not 24/7, but we definitely use them, and we use them respectfully. What I mean by that is that we don't chase other people out of the area. We're on public land where we have maybe a trail camera set up, and some of it, I just think it's kind of cool I just think it's fun to get the pictures. Like, to
Yeah,
me,
absolutely.
I don't even, I use them a little bit for scouting, but mostly from, I just like seeing wildlife. And so
Absolutely.
I love seeing the, fence crossing pictures of an antelope,
Yeah.
or a water hole picture of a big bull elk coming in. I just think that's cool. And so, it's like any tool. You could say that with long range shooting and hunting and some of the advancements that have been made there. You can argue all day long, and people do that, that's unethical. And you can say that about trail cams, you can say that about tree stands, you can say that about ATVs, you can say that about anything. And the point is, when you abuse the intent of the product, then obviously people are going to introduce legislation. So my personal hope is, I hope they don't take it too far,
Yep.
because I love trail cams as a tool, and as just a fun little thing to do also. And I think it's just one of me personally, using trail cams is just one more excuse for me to get out in the field and being setting those up, studying the animals. I think it does the opposite. I think if they're used responsibly, I think it helps you become a more ethical hunter, because you're learning the behavior of these animals throughout, again, their life cycle. You're not just going out there as a weekend warrior hoping to get lead in the side of something.
Right.
It's, you're studying them like you're earning a PhD on them almost. To me, that should be all part of the equation. It's your actual time in the field, plus you're using devices like this to study them further, and then plus it's fun to share with people. That doesn't mean you're sharing, hey, this buck is there at 2 o'clock, go there at 1:30 so you can shoot him by that one tree. That's
Which
not
has
how it
never
works.
happened.
Yeah, that's not the intent.
No.
And I think and this is sort of a call to hunters too, I think right now, that quit being our own worst enemy. Quit abusing the privileges. Using something like a trail camera is not a right, it's a privilege,
Yeah.
and they can take it away.
Yeah.
And so if we abuse it, they will take it away. That's what some states are trying to do. And quit abusing it, then there'll be no argument.
That's great perspective. Great
Yeah.
perspective. So, well, Brandon, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we get to do this again and maybe pick a different topic. Dig a little bit
Sure.
deeper in. But I wish you a very safe and productive spring and summer, and be safe.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a bunch. I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.